Well, again, I just want to say a very good evening to all of you and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this evening on our armchair travel journey. The last number of nights, several of us have got together and decided to escape the world and go someplace else for a little while. I have lived by the mantra that to travel is to live, and no matter what it is, I have got to travel in my life. My name is Jennifer Reynolds. I am the Regional Director of Sales in the Southeast for Scenic. I've been in the travel industry pretty much all of my life, although I was born and raised in Canada. I spent 18 years of my life living and working on cruise ships. And that little gem over there on the right-hand side takes me back to, well, as you can see, Barbados in 1991. I had the opportunity last year to do what I called a year of AAA. I did Africa, Tanzania and Africa. I got to Australia in Tanzania, in Hobart in Tasmania, in Australia. And the last thing that I was able to do was get down to the Antarctic, the seventh and last continent. And right before the end of the year, before all this Michigas started, that photograph was taken, the seventh continent, probably one of the greatest days of my life. But my husband, Dr. Stuart B. Nelson, oceanographer, introduced me a lot to travel. I really got into history, geography. When I went to cruise ships originally, I worked as a rep for a Canadian tour operator. My first husband was a juggler unicyclist, and I was part of a duo juggling magic act while running shore excursions, but that's a story for another day. What it did afford me was an opportunity to do a tremendous amount of travel around the world, and then this little puppy dog popped up on the bottom right-hand side there. Some old cruise ship people. Jeff Hughes is still sailing at sea on the Queen Mary. To my right there, a guy by the name of Richard Joseph, who's an entertainment director over on Princess. I've been following his posts. So a deep and rich history in the travel world, and I'm just delighted that you've come along tonight to share a little bit of it with me. This evening, I want to share some stuff about Italy. The other night, some of you joined me. We have done a little bit of a trip down the rivers. We went down the Antarctic. We took a look at Ecuador and the Galapagos, spin through the Panama Canal the last 2 nights, and some historical info on Venice. But I love sunflowers and I love Italy. So I thought what a magical time for all of us to look at Rome, Florence, and Venice as a destination, as places that we can go to, as ways that we can think about traveling. Jan, let me do a quick audio check-in here. You said I'm breaking up. I'm sitting a little bit more stable here. So let me make sure that you can hear okay. Just give me a little thumbs up. Karen, it's always a delight to see you. I owe you lunch. Unless I hear differently, I'm going to assume that that sound is okay for everyone, because I think all of us feel very much the same, that for us, love and travel and life just go hand in hand. And that's something that I have had a really good opportunity to do in my years of travel, is running shore excursions and getting involved in even deeper in many of the destinations that I've traveled to. I present to you Italy. It's certainly been in the news recently, and we have no reason to think about that as we explore this really magnificent country. Sardinia, off of there in Corsica, birthplace of Napoleon Bonaparte, kind of a history nerd over here, discovered that bluebird was the official bird of Italy, and if I was comparing it in size to something, Italy as a total is about 116 square miles, equal to about the size of Arizona. So think about things in terms of it. Northern part of the country, you know where the Alps are. The north and south of Italy, always very different. The boot over in Sicily is a story all on its own. I like to think that Sicily is probably 10 years behind the rest of Italy itself. But for the focus of our story tonight, I'd like to share with you about a journey from Rome, Florence, and Venice through Italy for people who love to travel, because Italy is so much more than a country. Italy is a lifestyle. And for any who have been, they desire to go back. For those who have not been, they dream of going there. And one can easily go in by cruise ship. Certainly I did that often enough when I ran shore excursions on board the Silver Sea ship. Silver Cloud was my girl. But so many ships sail over here recently. I was talking to one of the tour guides in the port of Civitavecchia, and she was saying one day they were having in excess of 13,000 people in one day going for tours into Rome from the port. So one can cruise in, one can go in by land. We've certainly seen an increase of people renting apartments or long terms. Travel agents put together the most incredible individual packages. I did a guided vacation with my husband throughout Italy, and that's how we chose to travel. And it actually, for us, turned out to be our last international travel that we were able to do together. Internationally, it was just so easy. We went into Rome on one end, so it was an open jaw. And folks, remember on our sessions here, I have travel agents as well as their guests and travelers. So I want to stay very broad in our description of places and really think about the opportunity that exists for all of us when we look to exploring our world. You know, in my world, Rome, Florence, and Venice, when I worked as the shore excursion manager in the office, a quick story, a customer returned from Florence, very, very upset one day and wanted their money back because she had paid to go to a place called Florence and she spent the day in a place called Firenze and she wanted her money back. And of course, Firenze is the Italian word for Florence. So I love to refer to Roma, Firenze, and Venezia. And when you look at Rome, Rome is such a rich plethora of history. And yes, I'm a history junkie. That's just the way it is. I love history. I love what makes these places. But when you're traveling and you're coming in, stay in a hotel, going locally, location, 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 it's the people, it's the places you're going to. This little Il Cantico hotel that was owned by a bunch of monks who happened to be outside the windows and sometimes doing some chantings in the morning within walking distance to markets and flowers. I made a point of buying and having little fresh flowers and sticking them into a little bucket of water if that's what I had to do. Being within walking distance, peak season here, June, July, August, and September, always taking a look at the square. And there was my husband, Stuart, and this was our trip in Rome, Florence, and Venice. This was always one of my favorite photographs, meeting the Swiss Guard. They're not often always so congenial. It did happen that the Pope was not in residence that day. I wouldn't have got as close to them as I did, but they were very comforting and they were very easy to be around and chatting with people. And this part of the trip was really just the beginning as we came in. Whether you go in by sea, if you come in, do a couple of nights in Rome, 3 nights, 4 nights. This is why we got our travel professionals, the ability to walk over to places like Castel Sant'Angelo. Uh, you come to Italy to eat and to drink and to see it and to smell it and to taste it and to feel it. And certainly it's a matter of wanting to be there and having the ability to be there during the day. And if you're on a ship, you can. But there's a magic. These are people that live. This is truly a lifestyle, and you point and think, what they got, I want some of this. And in the evening time, walking over the bridges, stopping in the cafes, we did a guided vacation and had a tour director with us. And so the kind of thing we did was 3 nights Rome, 3 nights Florence, 3 nights Venice, all of our accommodation, the big stuff that was included, including the museum, the Vatican Museum. This place gets over phenomenal amounts of visitors. This was first thing in the morning, people wanting to get into the museum. So it always amuses me when people say, yeah, sure, I'm going to go on travel and I'm going to wing it. I'm like, yeah, that's like trying to get a ticket to get into the Anne Frank house. Good luck with that one. This is what lineups look like in this part of the world. This is why you work with travel professionals to get you through these expedited entries, to be the first groups to walk inside. And I get chuffed when I look at these photos, thinking about looking at the ceilings and the mosaics in the Vatican museums and the staircases that were used when new popes are brought in. These were just exquisite opportunities to see things out of the lines. And so when you go in by ship or whether you go in by land, it's kind of knowing what you're doing. June, July, and August always being busy. Spring and summer, we see people go in January and February now. Why do people line up? because you get a chance to see some of the most greatest masterpieces in the entire world. I remember being in college feeling, finishing a degree recently at St. Leo University, and our professor threw a question out, and we had to write a paper, and he made us choose what we liked better, the Pieta or the David. I mean, seriously, that's like asking a mother to choose between two of her favorite children. But having the opportunity to go through the basilica to understand what you see, you can do short tours of it and longer tours. Trevi Fountain, trust me, that's probably the only time you'll ever see it without people in front of it. All of the money that people throw over their shoulders, that goes into the fountain. It is always collected for renovations, and those are often being done. In fact, recent renovations have been completed, but these places are just always busy because everyone really wants to get here. And, old takes on such an entirely new meaning in places like the Colosseum. And I purposely chose this photo. It's from one of my own because I just think if only the walls could talk, that this arena was built for games, for gladiators, for animals, for gatherings of people. And to see what we can see of it today, the great people and kings that were here, the great civilizations that existed. Maybe a day trip a little bit south if you want to go to Pompeii. I'm not going to touch on that today, but it's a phenomenal place. When 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, and well, just caused all kinds of mischief down that part of the country. But it's certainly with that Vesuvius as an active volcano. Here's a little piece of trivia for you. Two other active volcanoes, Mount Etna and Stromboli, all in Italy. Europe's three active volcanoes, all in Italy, and there's one of them. And it's because of all that ash and all that lovely soil that's left behind that we get these magnificent things. But, us travel professionals are always trying to tell travelers why it's a benefit to use the professionals, why to go to someone who really knows what they're doing. This was Christopher, our travel director. The end of the day, one day, he picked this up. A person had bought this scarf and he held it up and he said, "Folks, I'm just going to tell you, when you come to Rome, I'm not going to let this happen to you. I was born and raised in Rome, and I'm in Rome, and I'm not going to let you take home a fake souvenir." And someone said, "Well, how can you tell it's not a fake souvenir?" I challenge you all to take a look at that. Is there anything Roman about the middle of that? Don't you think that's the Acropolis? So Chris held this up and he said, "Got to tell you guys, I'm Italian. On my watch, nobody's going home with a scarf of the Acropolis on it and claiming they go home from Italy." So there's a lot to be said for authenticity. Rome, Florence, and Venice, yes, three cities, a lot of countryside in the middle. And one of the areas that touches my heart and soul is Assisi. Distances are not far. You can do it by train. You can certainly drive, although I'm not certain my marriage was ever certain enough for us to have been able to have handled that kind of stress on a marriage. There's a lot of ways to do this, but I really suggest you take a look at Assisi. St. Francis has a phenomenal story. Of course, I have a deep love of animals, as I know many of you do, but it is also the prayer of peace. And again, using the professionals, it's shocking to me when I worked on ships, people would go ashore and say, "Oh, I'll just find a local guide." I'm like, yeah, anybody with a pulse who can tell you any stories that they want. No, this is the truth. Many countries now will regulate their guides because they know those guides are telling the true story. You go to Egypt, you get an Egyptologist. You go to Russia, you get a highly educated university graduate. You go to the Galapagos, you get a level 3 guide, one who is not only fluent in English and Spanish, but can do it in the language of science. But Assisi is just one of the examples of really neat little geography and streets and geraniums, and this scene will repeat itself over and over and over again. And there we are, right outside of Florence or Firenze. And to this day, I cannot look at this picture without thinking of that woman demanding her money back and saying, "I gave you my money to go to a place called Florence. I spent my entire day in a place called Firenze, and I want my money back." And I had to knock the pen on the floor and reach down for the pen and had a nice little giggle and then explained to her again that Firenze is the Italian word for Florence, where I sold her the ticket to. But you can go in by day. There's chances to stay overnight. I firmly believe eating, drinking, smelling, sleeping, tasting. I have particular fond memories of Florence and evenings where daylight was long and walks through markets, phenomenal leather bags, can we say furla, and then drinks at a place that had a view like this on the top floor of a hotel before evening, walking along the waterfront and indulging in gelato. My game for myself was lemon gelato in every single place that I went every single day. And I can assure you I did not get sick of lemon gelato. Uh, and really, I think it just got better. But over on the right-hand side, a cherished memory for me, Stuart and I on a bridge right there. And these are the memories, these are the reasons why we travel. It isn't about stuff, it's about experiences. It's walking down the streets that Leonardo is said to have walked down. It's being smart enough to work with a travel professional so you don't get caught in lineups like this. It's knowing enough that when you go in to see the David, that he is now around protection. And well, I guess I should be a little careful how I say that, but there was an incident that happened with the David in the Piazza where people came in with instruments and hammers and tried to damage them. So now there's a plexiglass around the David, and he's just masterful. Look at his hands. And there was my professor trying to say to me, which one's better? I mean, wow, I just not clear how anyone can do that. Coffee addictions are sure to happen. This is called pocket coffee. To this day, I still order it for myself. Travel agent partners, if you ever send someone to Italy, this makes a great gift. You can buy them on Amazon.com. Believe it or not, it's made by the people that make Ferrero Rocher. And inside is a shot of espresso coffee. Our TD was always giving us little treats. We were always sharing, certainly an opportunity to get over to see Pisa. But you know, it's farmhouses and countrysides and bicycle riding and trying different olive oils and wineries, and red wine is a food group. Let me say that again. Red wine is a food group. That's what my mother used to always say. She always used to say as well, young lady, wait until you hit 40. Time goes fast. You need glasses, and you never pass a ladies' room just in case. But I still think she's right more about the red wine than anything else. Man, you just eat and drink your way around here. You can do it top shelf. You can do it takeaway. I constantly had little nibbles. I'm a grazer, and this is pizza, man. This is pizza, and taking some things back and popping them into your hotel, going out for a picnic, having a glass of wine and sitting on a park bench watching the world go by, hitting some of these small towns during festival time, during the Tuscany period, and fresh fruits and veggies in the markets everywhere. And yeah, the places where you can breathe, like in Montecatini or Siena or San Gimignano. And once again, I keep coming back to that fabulous leather bag, that Furla bag my husband bought me in this trip in Italy. There's a lot of war history as well. It's interesting to know you can do a war tour. Um, Food, wine, churches, history, family. It's pretty extraordinary what's here. And then when you get to the northern and the last, what I'll call big three, is Venice, Venezia. You know, Venice certainly has its number of challenges. This is one of my all-time favorite images of Venice in the whole wide world, and I'll see if I can get my spotlight to show you something. You see the train station right over here, the causeway, and we looked at this the other day when we talked about Venice. There is the S-shaped canal making her way with St. Mark's Square right here. If you're a cruise ship, you come in the Giudecca Canal right through this way, and that, my friends, is why we got issues with water pushing up against all of these buildings and bringing into dock here. And look to the left-hand, far left-hand bottom side, there's the airport. People wonder why transfers are expensive to the airport. Well, it's a long way to go and it's pricey. Right over here, the island of Burano. I'll show you some photograph of that I think, yes, I do have a photo of Burano. But this is what makes Venice, Venice Island proper, and Maestre over here. Once again, another reason why we always use a travel agent when exploring this part. There's a nice daily overhead shot. You see the train station. You see some greenery off to the left side. Many of the bridges that go across Venice. It's such a, well, it is, period, a walking city. There is no cars here. It's quite amusing to even see the FedEx vehicles go up and down the canals. The Grand Canals, the festivities, going into the Doge's palace across the Bridge of Sighs where the prisoners would be to be executed. It's life, living the memories. It's having had the opportunity to see these places. And Venice has a lot of challenges. Italy has a lot of challenges. The world has a lot of challenges. But something I know is that we were born to travel. We were born to make this happen. And we're going to continue to do that because of our emotional connection and our need to be able to do it. This is our Venice. I admit the first time I went to Venice, I didn't like it at all. I had gone in by cruise ship. It was very hurried. It was very fast. When I had an opportunity to slow down a little bit and start to understand more about the people, the culture, the living conditions, the 55,000 people that live on Venice Island, what daily life is like for them, the glass factories that are no longer on the outlying islands because their islands are sinking. I strongly encourage you to put on a set of earphones and listen to Vivaldi, Four Seasons, one of the most exquisite pieces of music in the world, and it was composed here. And there are concerts that you can go to where you can hear these pieces of music played live. Burano. I told you I would show you the island of Burano. Lynn, I see you said something about the sound. I'm going to count on that being okay for you, Lynn. But I showed you earlier on the overhead the sandbanks, and dredging is a problem kind of like in the Panama Canal. After all, a very small percentage of Venice is really land. So much of it is marsh and silt. But going to the island of Burano, you can go out by the ferries by Valpareiros, and certainly private water taxis are always something that can happen too. And there I throw that overhead image in so you can see, look where the airport is. And about 1 o'clock off of the airport there, you can see where the island of Burano is. Oh man, like I said earlier, if you've been to Italy, you want to go again. If you haven't been to Italy, it's on one of the places that you need to go, that you really should see. And whether it's Rome, Florence, and Venice, I wanted to focus on what we always called the big three and the classics. So many ways, again, by cruise ship, by land. Talking to a travel professional, there are many places you can stay here, whether they're with locals and some of the VRBOs. It's the myriad of opportunities, but I think it's really travel for the sake of being able to connect with individuals and real people. We're always looking for that level of authenticity. And I share this photograph of these women and my little hubby there. We were in the gondola, and this woman, and Marion was her name, she was from Australia. She was 92 years old, from Melbourne. She was Italian. She had never set foot on Italian soil before. She didn't speak a word of Italian. She didn't miss a thing. Everything we did, everywhere we went, she got down the curbs, around the corners, and she was just such an inspiration to me, and such a genuine reminder that if we really, really, really want to do something, that it's pretty likely you can make it happen if you set a plan in motion. And you know, people aren't traveling right at the moment, and many of us are trying to figure out what direction to go in and where to go. But the one thing I know for sure is that we're all going to be traveling again soon, whether it's on a river cruise, hopefully with Scenic or Emerald, in Europe, even in Asia, I've got things in Egypt, over in Russia. You know, the Antarctic, we talked about that on Saturday night, I believe it was, and I'm going to well, that presentation is up on the Facebook page, Jennifer Reynolds Travels. But the thing I encourage you to look at is places that are different, like the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. The other night we did look at Venice in a little bit more depth, although we talked more about history and some of the challenges that are facing the area and tourism related, especially with Moses. A transit through the Panama Canal, the Pedro Miguel locks, and Miraflores right there. Our world is really just waiting to continue for us to explore it. And every night at 7 o'clock, I committed to bring you a different journey. We have traveled to many of those places. Tomorrow night, I think we will jump off and head over to Ireland. Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales. Maybe take a little look at the Titanic Museum, a little bit of Bob Ballard and some of the undersea water work that they did in some of the recovery, and you know why people go to Ireland. And for heaven's sakes, the whole world wants to go to Ireland, I think, necessarily right behind Italy. Join me on Saturday night. My friend Ted Knight from Princess Cruises is going to join me. He's an expert in Alaska. Ted's going to spend half an hour with us. He said to me, you know, my talk on Alaska is usually an hour and 15 minutes. I said, well, Ted, it's a Saturday night. Have a glass of wine. We all will. And you can have 35 minutes. How's that? So Saturday night at 7 p.m. on our ArmChair travel series, Ted Knight will be joining us. And again, I'll be recording that and putting it up on my Jennifer Reynolds Travels. Alfie and I down there on the right-hand side, my little kitty cat, say thank you so much for joining us this evening. Here's a couple of movies for you to watch. If you've not seen Mel Brooks' History of the World, you like history, you got a brief understanding of it, it's an adult movie. You will absolutely love it. Roman Holiday, La Dolce Vita. Roman Holiday is a wonderful movie to watch with the family, and it might be one of the only other times than now we'll ever see photographs of Rome with the streets being as empty as they were then. Make a charcuterie board with your family and with your kids. Pour some wine and cheese, some Italian. Try some wines and cheeses. Make a homemade pasta or a pizza. Ladies, it's time for Eat, Pray, and Love Under the Tuscan Sun is always a phenomenal read. And Elena Ferrante is a very famous Italian author, which I might really recommend to you as well. A couple of things to look up, the David, the Pieta, look up Leonardo da Vinci and his influences in this area. And tomorrow night, same time, 7 o'clock, same link, we're off to Ireland. Saturday night, off to Alaska. And we'll see what Sunday night brings, but audios are available and recordings on Jennifer Reynolds Travels. CollageTravelRadio.com are also carrying some segments. And if you're interested in a little bit of further reading, really suggest take a look at Endeavor. I just finished this one tonight and just starting to read a little bit more about Magellan. For heaven's sakes, our world is an extraordinary place. The geography coloring book, I am not beyond it as an adult. In fact, I finished coloring Europe today and did a little review of Italy. If not ashamed to say, I went to Africa. Well, when I went last year, I used the coloring book also to broaden my scope of Eastern Africa, and I've been brushing up on some of the empires because, well, after all, it isn't going to be very long before we're all going to be traveling. Flights are going. Travel agents, you guys are going to be rocking it. People, our dreams are going to be coming true. Thank you to all of us, to all of you for joining me on our Armchair Traveler session this evening. I appreciate you for joining me, and I look forward to having you again tomorrow night.